topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, Portland. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Hey, I want to wish everybody a happy holiday. Please drive safe. I want you back with us next week. I got to tell you, when you get my age, this show we're getting ready to do on longevity and anti-aging is so important to me. And let me introduce you to our expert, Dr. Chris. We call him Dr. K because he's got a longer last name than I do. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hey, how are you, Steve? Thanks for having me back.
Hey, we love having you on. You are so, I gotta say, you are so informative on a subject because we do have a more mature audience and talking about longevity and anti-aging. The name of your practice is Upgrade Medical LLC. Right. Tell people about your practice.
Sure. We're a functional medicine practice. I'm a functional medicine provider. I have a blend of degrees and boards that I kind of mushed together to do this. And essentially we focus on, preventative care, optimization, longevity, but not in the sense of, I just want you to live forever. I want you to live well, right? Well, I'm 55 myself.
Oh, you look great.
So thank you. I'm 112. That's how good I am. Would never know. So I try to practice what I preach, right? Without being, I try not to make it like a cult-like scenario, right? Where it becomes somebody's job. I mean, people are passionate about their health. I'm passionate about my health. It's fun to follow, Instagram things and check your data with wearables. And I do all that too. That being said, you can go overboard. And I like people to have a balance of things. So, emphasize these things, focus on your optimization, your longevity, your health, but you don't have to make it your religion either, right? You can have a balance.
Chris, we had, when everybody saw you were coming on today, there was two questions that everybody had. Most of them wanted to know, what is functional medicine? Because we promote you that you do functional medicine. Mm-hmm. And the other one, everybody wants to know about weight loss. So let's start off with explaining functional medicine. Sure.
Functional medicine's essentially just a philosophical approach. By definition, the idea is that it addresses the root cause of a dysfunction. So instead of just going to your doctor and saying, this is my symptom, and then whatever the algorithm tells you to do, it's this drug for this symptom, or this lab for this symptom, or this referral for this system. We try to go, layers deeper than that to try and find what the, air quoting here, the root cause of that dysfunction is. What's the underlying process involved? And that could be a few things. And then the idea is, we still address the symptoms, But the idea is to peel layers of the onion, so to speak, off to get to whatever that issue is and hopefully correct it. And you correct it in a stepwise fashion by having a solid base and then refining as you go up. And that's typically, unlike Western medicine, which definitely has its place, which is a more linear approach. It's designed for specific things, population-based interventions, population-based safety parameters, screenings, those kind of things. And then, of course, the emergent things, right? Emergency room, you get hit by a car, you're not coming to see me, right? Emergency room, surgeries, etc. And that's...
You're not an orthopedic surgeon.
Right. And Western medicine does a really good job at that, right? This is, you have a heart attack, a stroke, etc. But that's pretty linear, right? It's a stepwise progression, whereas we're kind of a mess, right? Because the body works is a little bit of a mess, right? You've got multiple hundreds and thousands of biological processes happening every second, every moment. And, we can divide those up into systems, right? The immune system, the endocrine system, the inflammatory system, right? All these different things, the gastrointestinal system, the nervous system. And then those are all working together. So we're trying to find the cause of whatever dysfunction is, but usually it's spilling over into multiple areas because that's how the body works, whether it's cell energy or a nervous system imbalance or a mechanical injury that now drives inflammation and altered pain signaling, whatever the case may be. That's what we're trying to do, and then overlap those treatments to provide you the best outcome.
Chris, could you walk us through a typical patient from the time they enter your office? I think people would love hearing that.
Sure. It does depend a little bit on what they're presenting for, right? Somebody with a chronic illness, which historically was my sort of area, complex chronic pain, autoimmunity, those chronic fatigue syndromes, fibromyalgia, those sort of things. That's different than somebody coming in for, hey, I want to optimize, I want to have preventative health. But the process, essentially, we're going to have a very long visit. I'm going to go through an obnoxious amount of paperwork that I made you fill out with a bunch of standard screening forms, as well as some specific questions that I added so that I can get context, right? And then once I've gone through that, sometimes people have labs or tests already, and that can be helpful because sometimes knowing what's already been done or what hasn't worked also gives us information. So I kind of go through all that, scribble a bunch of notes to myself, and then we sit down with the patient. And then the idea is I'm going through and verifying all that and then getting clarification in context, right? Sometimes it might be something like you've come, I'm just making this up, but you come in because you have these chronic gastrointestinal symptoms. And in all the times you've been treated and getting all these tests, nobody asked you, oh, you had traveled to India and you got sick in India? Okay, so that points us in a direction, as example. Or, you have, chronic fatigue syndrome and they haven't tested for all the viruses. Or you have, they say that you have fibromyalgia, but haven't tested for X, Y, and Z. Right. So we try to get context. We try to pinpoint what we call the primary generator, whether it's pain or dysfunction. So what is that primary thing? Like I said, there's usually a few things that can be contributing to any one problem, but is there a primary target we can go after? So if somebody has chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, right, and we identify they have active viral infections or active chronic infections, well, that's a pretty clear target, right? Even though we're still going to address their nervous system and their nutrient deficiencies and their hormones. But the primary target's going to be, some sort of antimicrobial, right? So we try to do that, and then layer by layer. Typically, it does involve a lot of labs. Most of the time, I utilize regular labs, just a lot of them. And then we adjust the ranges instead of being a population-based range that's a bell curve that, D minus to A plus is all normal in a population curve, but I want people in an A or a B, right? So we kind of narrow those ranges and then look for patterns that might present in blood work because we have a lot more data. And then we find what we find and we treat it.
So with functional medicine, Chris, you talk about the root causes. What about people with multiple issues or with no specific diagnosis like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia?
Yeah. So there is always a cause. The question is, can we find it, or do we even know enough to find it? Those are the questions, right? So, pain's a good example, like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. Those tend to overlap. Sometimes there's a clear cause. There was a triggering event, and this lit up the nervous system, caused a bunch of things. Sometimes it's an infection that led to an immune activation in the brain that triggered pain. And sometimes we can't figure it out. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Bless you. That's okay.
And sometimes we can't figure it out. And then we kind of have to work backwards. The amorphous syndromes can be harder, and usually those are what I was describing, multi-system dysfunctions, right? And a lot of times the diagnosis really is less important than identifying that primary thing and the key sources of those dysfunctions, because then we have something to target, right? Giving a diagnosis doesn't always mean anything, right? But if we find, it could be anything from, chronic Epstein-Barr to, hey, you had a pretty significant trauma history. Your adverse childhood event score was very high. You just described to me this horrible event. You've never been to counseling. Your brain can change and literally cause, it's called neuroplastic changes. And in this case, they're negative neuroplastic changes that can lead to dysfunctions. Sometimes it's the opposite. You have this condition and, that can impact your mood, right? And everything is sort of interrelated. And so those multi-system dysfunctions, you're just systematically trying to address each of them while supporting the others, right? So what I try to describe to people is that whatever intervention I do and whatever target I'm going for, I want to use things that overlap. So it might be a primary immune issue, but it's going to spill over into inflammation, right? So I want every treatment to be 2 + 2 = 6. Right? To get synergy so that all the systems start coming back online and then supporting the whole.
How long does it usually take for you to find out the root cause?
Oh, instantly. I'm very good. No, it can be, that was a joke. Sometimes
is everybody's body different?
Sure. Sometimes I would say most of the time we can identify something, right? But there are times that that's not the case. And in those cases, we're supporting symptoms and systems that we can extrapolate, maybe have a contribution to that. And sometimes it's very easy. We do a specialized stool test and we find chronic infections that have been there forever, or a parasite or something like that. And then we treat that, right? So sometimes, but it doesn't always mean, finding the root cause doesn't always mean that the issue instantly resolves, because the longer you've had something, the body tries to adapt to that, right? So you can get neurological changes, you can get immune shifts, you can get, stuck in these pathways that can take time to come out of. So, and that's why it is important to also address people's symptoms, right? You can't just say like, oh, we're going to spend the next year looking at root causes. In the meanwhile, just be in pain and not be able to move. Right. That's not great either, right? So you kind of got to balance those out. And then hopefully, it's pretty systematic, right? You start broad, you put the pillars of health in place, make sure that's done, right? Do they have good mental health, spirituality, however you want to frame that for yourself, kind of mind, body, spirit, right? The spiritual aspect, quality sleep, some degree of activity, preferably actual exercise. And I'm missing one. Oh, and diet, of course, diet and nutrition, right? And so that's the pillar base of the pyramid. And then we, take their labs and we start refining as we go, right? So they might be a little suboptimal thyroid. Their vitamin D might not be perfect. It might be below what we wanted. They might be, suboptimal in their testosterone or their estrogen or whatever the case may be, B12. And then you start taking, that's all pretty low hanging fruit, right? We have a lab, we have a symptom, we can do an intervention. Does that always amount to cure? Not necessarily, but we are correcting those things and hopefully we're seeing improvements over time.
Chris, how do you deal with stress?
Myself personally or for people?
No, for your patients.
So, perfect.
Well, you're in a good mood today. Must be the holidays.
Yeah, it's my final push, right? Stress, I'm a big believer in counseling, and cognitive behavioral therapy in particular. I think everybody should be doing counseling, or at least when they need it. If you're disciplined enough, having some sort of mindfulness practice is always good, whether it's meditation or even just shutting down, going for a walk, something like that, just kind of disconnecting from screens, work, that kind of thing. Vagal nerve stimulation, I'm a very big fan of. The vagal nerve is our largest cranial nerve. It kind of controls everything that you're not consciously thinking of: breathing, heart rate, digestion, arousal, everything. And it also controls an inflammatory pathway, controls neural inflammation. It hardwires the gut and the brain together. That's why they often call the gut the second brain, because there's a direct bidirectional communication there. And by treating that, you can actually increase your parasympathetic tone, the part of the body, the tone that's opposite of kind of fight or flight, right? It's kind of the calming part of the nervous system. And that can do it, and that actually alters endocrine markers. Sometimes we need some herbal help, right? And we can use herbs that are in what we call the adaptogenic class of herbs, meaning they adapt the body to stress. And that's where you hear a lot of people talk about adrenal glands. And there's hormones and some nutrients that do that as well. But yeah, exercise, probably the number one treatment for stress, right? So,
because I know weight loss, you deal in weight loss, and I know stress has a lot to do with that.
Sure. Stress raises cortisol. Cortisol impacts the body's ability to utilize insulin, if not creating insulin resistance. It also can drive or prolong inflammatory stuff, keeping you in that sort of heightened, agitated state. So there's various models of stress, but the reality is it can do a lot of damage to the body. I have seen even in myself, we had a pretty acute stressful period that lasted several months, and my labs looked absolutely terrible as I came out of it. And I had to do some of these things myself. I did some neurologically calming peptides. I took adaptogenic herbs, nutrients, and tried to work on some biofeedback with a brain tap device. And, then I saw, as the stress period went and I did all these things to intervene, my labs came back into, exactly where I wanted them. But it is pretty amazing. We joke about stress being a health problem, and, they put it in the movies, the guy chugging Pepto-Bismol at his desk. But the reality is it's 100% true, right? It's very impactful.
Well, I keep hearing this hot topic, peptides.
Sure.
Why is there controversy with peptides?
Probably because too many people are hawking them on Instagram without knowing what they're doing.
Oh,
But no, a lot of it, I mean, I'm joking, but that to a degree, I'm joking. But the controversy is because often they're not FDA approved for a specific condition. Okay. That can be relevant or not, right? I mean, doctors of all sorts prescribe things off label all the time, right? And so that's not necessarily a game ender, right? But when they're completely experimental, have been through no trials, that's a little different, right? Then you're not using it off label, you're kind of extrapolating and hope that it works. Now, it depends where you get the data from, because a lot of peptides, at least the old tried and true peptides that were kind of that I'd been using for a decade before the newer, more popular ones, they kept creating new ones. All that data was pretty well established. A lot of it came out of Russia, a famous doctor there. And we had a lot of trials on several of them, and a lot of the peptides were FDA approved. But, they're not patentable, so the ones that are patented end up in conflict with compounding pharmacies. Then you have people that open pharmacies that are technically FDA approved facilities, but they're not FDA approved to make prescriptions in the same way. So that's where you see the research type chemicals, the research peptides come out, because you as a patient can buy those because you're experimenting on yourself, though they're technically not for human consumption. I cannot use those because they literally say not for human consumption. As a doctor, I can't utilize those. So I have to use ones that I've made for you, or that are for physician use, clinical dispense only. And there is some concern about the source material, how much they're testing, how clean the product is. There is some concern about that.
Chris, I got to tell you, this is one show I wish was an hour long. How do people get a hold of you?
So they can go to my website. I do have a free discovery session that I called the Discovery Session. My website is Upgrade PDX, like the abbreviation for Portland, upgradepdx.com. The phone number of the office is 971-299-8350. I don't answer it because it's just me, but if you leave a message or text it, I will get back to you. And that's pretty much it. That's how you get me.
Chris, have a wonderful holiday. Chris will be back with us next month. And Chris, I love you doing your show. You're just a world of information.
We'll
see you next month. Happy holidays.
Absolutely. Happy holidays to you and everybody else.
We're going to go to break. We'll be right back.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.